everyone, this is Gwen. In this video today, I'm going to show you how to make the Big Bear Ear Warmer. So the idea of making an ear warmer came to me when winter came, and I just thought to myself, I want an ear warmer. And knowing me and knowing myself, I knew I wanted something that goes beyond the regular rectangular block of fabric that goes over your forehead and covers your ear. I knew that those probably wouldn't sit on my head very well because of the shape of my head. You know those like fabric hairbands with the elastic bit in the middle? I cannot have them sit and stay on my head to save my life. So then I started thinking about having an ear warmer that's secured under my chin, and I want it to be like a certain width so that it covers my ears and just provides the right amount of actual warmth and serves its function of being an ear warmer, right? But then working on a prototype, I realized that once it gets to a certain width, there needs to be some darts added in place for the ear warmer to actually sit nicely on my head, on anyone's head for that matter, which is why you can see that little gap in the pattern piece for the headpiece, because that is the dart that actually gives this ear warmer a little bit of shaping for it to sit a little better on the head. And the interesting thing is, once I had the darts installed, I realized that, oh, now the ear warmer can actually sit on my head so much better. Look. Also, I actually started with the bunny ear version first because it's the year of the rabbit, and then I made this bear ear version with this sherpa fleece, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And so I decided to name it the Big Bear Ear Warmer because all my other patterns so far are kind of named after constellations and whatnot as well. So there we go. I hope this pattern brings you a little bit of joy and warmth during the cold and dreary days of winter. And this is how you can make your own version. Let's go! To make one Big Bear Ear Warmer, you'll need the following. In this video, I'm using this super soft and plush fleece fabric to sew my ear warmer. We're gonna start by getting the sewing pattern ready. As always, make sure you have the pattern printed at 100% scale and double check that you have the right scale by using the test square over here. Assemble the pattern and cut the pattern pieces out. In this video, we're making the teddy bear version of the ear warmer, and for that, we'll be using two pattern pieces, the head piece and the teddy bear ear. I'm going to be referring to this pattern piece as the ear for the rest of the video. Now, before we start cutting the fabric, I just want to take a moment to talk about the pile, in other words, the texture of the fabric. You can see that when I brush my hand in this direction on the fleece fabric, the fur lays nice and smooth, but when I brush my hand in the opposite direction, the fur kind of stands up, and when you feel the fleece, it feels rough. When cutting the pattern pieces out with this fleece fabric, I made sure that I had all the pile laying in the same direction for each pattern piece. To make one teddy bear ear warmer, cut 4 pieces of the headpiece with the fabric of your choice. Cut 4 pieces of the bear ear with your fabric. And also cut 2 pieces of the bear ear with interfacing. Now let's start sewing. We're going to start by applying interfacing to the wrong side of the ear piece. Do this for 2 ear pieces. Next, place 2 ear pieces right sides together, one with interfacing and one without interfacing. Sew all around the ear pieces with 5/8 inch seam allowance and leave that straight edge at the bottom open for turning the ear inside out later. So a little bit of note on the seam allowance. Now, in most sewing projects, when you have this amount of thickness in the seam allowance, you will be asked to trim it off to reduce the bulk. But when sewing these teddy bear ears with a soft squishy fabric like this type of fleece, It may be thick, but it's still super soft and squishy. So when I turn the ears right sides out, the thickness of the fabric in the seam allowance actually kind of acts as like a polyester filling of some sort to the ears, and it just makes the ears like extra squishy. So if you're making the ears using a thick squishy fabric, it's kind of optional to trim the seam allowance. But if you're making the ears using fabrics that are a bit thinner, say maybe jersey and just thinner fleece, then you probably have to consider trimming off the seam allowance. And I'll show you different examples at the end of the video. When you've turned the ear right sides out, this is how it should look. Make sure you do the same for the other ear. When sewing with fleece fabrics or even faux fur fabrics, sometimes the pile gets stuck between the seams after sewing. And I like to optimize the look of the pile by trying to get more of it out of the seams. Sometimes using a pin to kind of lift it out of the seams work, but for this type of slightly curly type of pile, I found that just using my nails to gently scratch it out is the method that works the best. So we're going to do that and clean up the seams as we go along. And now we're going to attach the ear to the headpiece. We're going to place the earpiece right inside the deepest part of the gap in the middle of the headpiece. This gap actually forms the dart, and the dart is what gives shaping to the ear warmer. Fold the headpiece in half lengthwise and sandwich the ear right in the middle. Sew the dart in this manner. You will notice that I'm barely using any sewing pins or clips at all when sewing this ear warmer in this video because the fleece fabric is really just so thick, but still soft. But if you feel like you do need something to hold the fabric together, then I recommend using sewing clips and just clipping 2 layers at a time to make things a little bit more manageable. We're sewing through 4 layers of fleece fabric right here. My home sewing machine actually had a little bit of difficulty, but I was able to get through that by using my left hand to gently pull the fabric through and my right hand to stabilize and to push the work through. Repeat the same process with the second ear piece, and when you're done, you should have 2 halves of the head pieces with the ears attached. And now we're going to sew the remaining 2 head pieces. Just like before, fold the headpiece in half lengthwise and sew the dart. Now we're going to take these 2 head pieces without the ears attached, and we're going to place them right sides together and sew along the center seam, leaving a 2-inch wide opening in the middle of the seam. This gap is for us to turn the ear warmer right sides out later, so make sure you do a little bit of back stitch here to prevent the stitches from unraveling. Now we're going to repeat the same process with the head pieces with the ears attached. The ears really make everything so much bulkier and a little tricky, so make sure you have them folded in opposite directions so that it's easy for you to handle the layers of fabric when you're sewing at your machine. Even when you're using a walking foot, fleece fabrics can still shift quite a bit if you're sewing with a home sewing machine. So the trick to making sure that you have the dart aligned in your sewing is to start about ½ an inch before the dart. Sew across in one direction first and then do it again in the opposite direction the second time. Remember to scratch out the pile along the seams as you go.
Do you know what this reminds me of? Scratching my dog.
Now at this stage, you should have a half of the ear warmer with ears attached and a half of the ear warmer without the ears attached. Next, we're going to sew the ribbon in place. Cut 2 pieces about 20 inches long each. Place the ribbon right in the middle of each end of the headpiece and stitch them in place. Before we move on to the next step, I recommend using a safety pin to pin the length of ribbon onto the fabric so they don't get in your way of sewing later. Now we're going to place the two halves of the ear warmer right sides together, matching them at the center seam and along the raw edges. If you're worried about the fabric shifting and ending up with two layers of fabric of different lengths at the end of sewing, then use the same trick as before and start sewing where the center seam is first and break up this entire round of sewing into quarters. When you're done, this is how your ear warmer looks right now. And this time, we are going to trim the seam allowance. But we're only trimming the seam allowance for the headpiece without the ears. When you're done, turn the ear warmer right sides out. And this is what it looks like. One last final step, because we still have that opening on the wrong side of the ear warmer. Hand sew this opening closed with a ladder stitch. It's a little tricky for me to show you how to do the ladder stitch with this fabric in this video, but I have another shorter video showing you how to do that on a regular cotton fabric, so check that out if this is something you're interested in. I 100% recommend learning the ladder stitch. It's basically like the only hand sewing stitch that I do. Finally, put the ear warmer on and trim the ribbon to a length that you like, and you're done! So this is the bunny ear version of the ear warmer, and I made it using thinner fleece fabric that is actually thrifted baby blankets. And you can see that I made the ear using this gray fabric on one side and this slightly fluffy pink one on the other side. I also trimmed the seam allowance and I did not add interfacing to the ears over here. So overall, it's just way floppier. It's gonna be impossible for the bunny ears to stand up without wires added, so this is how it looks. And with this being a thinner fleece fabric, you can also see the contouring on the top of the head much better. So I hope you found this step-by-step sewing tutorial for making the Big Bear ear warmer helpful. If you're sewing this up, make sure you look at the written instructions to get the measurement of my head from one earlobe across to another and the finished measurements of the ear warmer to get a little bit of reference of how it will fit on your head. And if you need to make adjustments, I go through that in the written instructions as well. Give this video a thumbs up even if you're just here to sightsee and not really sew the pattern. It really goes a long way. I will see you in the next one. Bye!